Greetings to all and welcome to the Seattle Law of One podcast. Today's episode is about crystals. There are few spiritual tools and accessories as attractive and as appealing as crystals. They're beautiful to look at and have been mentioned many times in channeling transcripts, not just in terms of how we can use them for meditation or for healing, but also in terms of how we ourselves are crystalline entities. How can we use crystals for meditation and for healing? And how are we ourselves crystalline beings? Let's find out. My name is Jonathan Tong, and I'm facilitator for the Seattle Law of One study group. We can be found in the list of study groups on the L&L Research website shown on your screen. We do also have a Facebook group, and we meet on Zoom twice a week, Tuesdays from 3 to 5 p.m. Pacific time, Saturdays 8 to 10 a.m. Pacific time. You don't have to live in Seattle or anywhere near Seattle to join our Facebook group or our Zoom meetings. Anyone who's interested and available is welcome. Just contact us at seattlelawofone@gmail.com to get on our mailing list. We send out emails once a week to let you know what we're talking about that week, as well as the Zoom links. We also have a YouTube channel where we keep recordings of our previous podcast episodes, as well as recordings of Q&A sessions with Jim McCarty, Austin Bridges, Gary Bean, and Trisha Bean from the L&L Research Channeling team. Just hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel to get notifications when we upload new videos, and contact us at seattlelawofone@gmail.com if you would like to join any of our Q&A sessions. Otherwise, as mentioned, today's podcast episode is on crystals. Let's meet our panelists today. Panelists, if you could introduce yourself by your name, where you're calling from, and maybe in a few words, how you use crystals. Jasmine, would you like to start?
Thank you, Jonathan. My name is Jasmine Harris. I'm calling from Arkansas, and I use crystals, honestly, almost every day in one form or fashion, either in healing. I energize my water with crystals. I wear crystals. So I find that crystals have really become an integral part of my life.
So wonderful, and so looking forward to hearing more about it and learning more about it. Tom?
Hi, nice to see you both. My name's Tom Luce. I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I'm relatively new to crystals. I started with the purchase of this one quartz crystal that I have. And truth be told, last night, as I was studying for this podcast, I found myself online, and I think I bought about 7 other little crystals. So there's a lot to learn, but I appreciate being here and looking forward to speaking with you.
Nice. So appreciate your being here, Tom. Thanks for joining us. And for the record, yeah, I've been using crystals for a few years. I have about 3 quartz crystals that I use mainly for meditation, and we will learn more about that. Otherwise, I did want to remind folks who are watching that none of us here are experts on crystals or on the Law of One. We are just basically normal people like you, hanging out, sharing our thoughts on spiritual things that seem important to us. Anything we say could be wrong, and all are encouraged to disagree with anything or everything that any of us say. Otherwise, if you are already familiar with the Law of One and the entity known as Quo, you might want to skip ahead to the chapter on how crystals work. If you are not familiar with both of those, here are a few things that might help the rest of what we're saying today make more sense. What is the Law of One? You can think of the Law of One as a set of spiritual teachings based on the understanding that all is one and that one thing is love. Everything we say today is basically some variation of that one statement. And everything we read today has come to us through the process known as channeling. You can think of channeling as a form of telepathic contact between humans and entities such as angelic beings, extraterrestrial beings, spirits of deceased, higher self, inner planes entities, etc. A channel basically serves as a mouthpiece for other entities to speak through. And in this case, those entities appear to be of extraterrestrial origin. There are 2 types of channeling that have been used by our friends at L&L Research. Trance channeling is when the channel is in a trance state, meaning they are subconscious or unconscious as if asleep and not aware of what words are coming out of their mouth as they're speaking. This is how contact was made with the entity known as Ra back in the early 1980s. Conscious channeling is when the channel is conscious, but in a deep meditative state, meaning they are only somewhat aware of what words are coming out of their mouth as they're speaking. This is how contact was made with the entity known as Quo, starting in the mid-1980s up to present day. Who is Quo? You can think of Quo as a group entity made up of 3 social memory complexes: Ra at 6th density, Latui at 5th density, and Hatan at 4th density. You can think of a social memory complex as a planetary consciousness, as if the entire human population of Earth was merged into one group mind. What are densities? You can think of densities as different levels of consciousness, different levels of reality. Imagine that the elements of earth, fire, water, and air have some primitive form of consciousness. Whatever that is, we call that first density. You can think of second density as the density of consciousness of plants and animals, clearly a quantum leap above the level of consciousness of, say, inanimate matter. You could think of third density as the density of consciousness of humans and cetaceans like whales and dolphins. Again, a significant quantum leap beyond the consciousness of other animals or plants. You can think of fourth density as the density of social memory complexes, the density of the consciousness of an entire planetary consciousness of all humanity merged into one consciousness. Again, clearly a quantum leap above third density. You can think of fifth density as whatever would be a comparable quantum leap beyond that, and sixth density as whatever would be a comparable quantum leap above that. If you are more interested in densities, we have a whole episode on that coming up. For now, suffice it to say, the entity known as Quo appears to be made up of 3 planetary consciousnesses, one at 6th density, one at 5th density, and one at 4th density. First contact with Quo was made by the LNL research channeling team in 1986, almost 2 years after the end of the raw contact in 1984. And they have been channeled every month since then up to the present day by the LNL research team. And you can find transcripts of those sessions at the LNL Conscious Channeling Library. Having said that, let's take a look at some passages on the question of how do crystals work? On November 21st, 1999, Quo is recorded as saying, "The general principle of the use of the crystal is that there is a geometrical and arithmetic relationship of various angles and sides and nature of the crystal itself, which lends itself to certain kinds of uses depending upon the ability of the entity which utilizes the crystal to regularize and harmonize its own being, its own personality with the crystal being used. The charging of any crystal is done by the focus of the intention within the heart and mind while in the meditative state upon the crystal, which is held in various positions ranging from the lower to the higher chakras. This done over a period of time then creates a harmonic resonance, shall we say, between the entity and the crystal, so that the crystal acts as that which magnifies the intentions of the entity using it." Sorry, I got lost. As we mentioned previously, the specific use to which the crystal is put is determined by the nature of the crystal, its size, and its purity. The nature of the entity utilizing the crystal is as important, if not more so, than the nature and purity of the crystal used. So many fascinating things to look at here, and bear in mind, this came through the process of channeling. The person who was saying these words out loud really didn't know what they were going to be saying beyond the end of one sentence, maybe in the beginning of another. So for those who are not familiar with chakras, chakras in the Hindu tradition refer to energy centers that process energy known as prana in Hindu traditions, or chi in Eastern mystical traditions, or life force or intelligent energy is referred to in the Law of One. That energy apparently flows upward through the earth through the red ray center, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and out the violet ray energy center as shown on your screen. So we did do another episode on chakras and energy centers. That was episode 14. So if you're interested in learning more about that, feel free to check it out. Otherwise, yeah, I do find it fascinating that crystals can be used, placed near those energy centers to help enhance the resonance, you could say, of that energy. And I suppose using them as a way of amplifying or magnifying your intentions is important. Jasmine, did you have any thoughts, reflections on anything here?
Actually, I do. Before I came to the law of one material, and that's why I had mentioned to you offline in another discussion, that's one of the things that really attracted me to the law of one, because it just resonated with what I felt already. I found and I learned that using crystals in the Reiki healing work that I do simply magnifies my ability to channel divine Reiki energy to the person who needs the help and the healing. And so I was fascinated by the idea that using the crystals that I already had around, just by simply changing their, just changing the way that I arrange them and the way that I use them, really truly made a difference in my Reiki healing sessions. And of course, I do self healing or self Reiki every few days on myself. And even I noticed the difference in the way I felt just by utilizing the crystals in a certain manner. And I did find, honestly, that my own intention, my own state of mind, when I picked the crystal up and began to use it, also really made a difference in the way and the amount of Reiki energy that I could channel at any given time.
I know there are quite a few in the Law of One community who are Reiki practitioners or at least familiar with it. For our viewers who are not familiar with Reiki, spelled Reiki, if I understand correctly, can you sum up, explain a little bit about what exactly Reiki is, Jasmine?
Sure. The word Reiki is actually a Japanese word, and it's a compound word. Rei Ki. Rei is universal energy and life force. Reiki is universal energy and life force that we all have access to at any given time. The difference in someone who chooses to channel Reiki energy is we've made a conscious, deliberate decision to attune ourselves to the frequency of that energy. So even though the energy is around and available for our use at any time, you have to be attuned to that energy. The same way, if you want to listen to a country Western song, you have to tune your radio to a country Western station. And so the divine Reiki energy that we channel is really energy, which is basically love energy, that helps an individual or even an animal with their own healing process. So it's not like we're, quote, healers per se. We use Reiki energy to amplify the natural healing abilities that each person or each entity has.
Thank you. Yeah, beautiful analogy. I like the tuning analogy and radio station. That makes a lot of sense. And I'm sure we're going to want to hear more about that when we read some passages about crystals and healing. For now, before I turn to Tom, real quick, Jasmine, do you use crystals in connection to various energy centers in the Reiki healing or otherwise?
I do.
Any particular ones?
I use my quartz crystal. Quartz crystal. This one is one that I wear all the time because it's considered the workhorse crystal. It amplifies the energy of other crystals. So I definitely always use this one. I made for myself a crystal rod, a crystal wand, which is actually a rod, where I have different crystals that resonate and work very well with all of the different chakras of the body. So if I have a particular issue with a person or with myself, I typically apply my crystal wand to it to just boost and amplify the energy. I typically use amethyst because it's a natural healing energy. I use rose quartz because it helps to open the heart chakra, which is love, and the heart chakra, as we know, which is really the central hub of the entire chakra system, is located at the heart. And so if you open the heart, you have a much better chance of creating this natural flow up and down the spine and the chakra system. So, honestly, Jonathan, I think depending on whatever issue it is that I'm trying to address, that determines which crystal I grab and use.
Yeah, interesting. That makes perfect sense. I love using quartz crystals too. The three that I use generally are quartz crystals of different shapes. And yeah, I like the heart chakra. The green ray, as you said, is, if there was a most important one for us to be working with in third density, that heart chakra of unconditional love is probably the most important one. And so I often have my crystal holding it close to heart to magnify, intensify those energies. Tom, any thoughts, reflections on anything in the passage or anything we've been talking about?
Yes, thank you. I think that's very interesting what Jasmine is saying, and in some of the research that I did before we met, I looked into how the different crystals would align to the different chakras, and started noticing that some of the most precious crystals or gemstones are the ones that have the powerful colors similar to our chakras. And it did make me consider whether the reason emeralds and rubies and stones like that have become precious on this planet, if that tied back to a metaphysical understanding back in those times. And I haven't been able to answer that question, but it did make me consider it. And in general, I always like to know why something works the way it does. And so that was really what I was curious to find out. And so I did some research, just a little bit about like the actual molecular stones, or the makeup of these crystals. And apparently the molecules and I guess I guess some of the other atoms inside the crystals, they're highly ordered in the way they're put together in some sort of lattice structure. And there's many different geometric shapes that they come in. So you kind of start. I kind of found myself sort of considering sacred geometry and how those things work, and perhaps these crystals tap into that in some sense. But the one thing that I thought was most interesting in this passage, that I think we'll see in some of the other passages as well, is that, I don't know that the crystals are necessarily, I don't think we're necessarily influencing the crystals when they're being used as much as, similar to what Jasmine said. It sounds like what we're doing is, our intention is directing the energy that is coming from the crystal. So if the crystal puts off a certain energy, almost like a fire would put off heat, instead of that energy just sort of disappearing, it sort of can be harnessed or directed in a way that would magnify the intention that maybe is coming from whichever chakra is emanating that. So
I think so.
I just think
That's
it's
my
fascinating.
understanding
But
of
I
it.
did notice, yeah, yeah, I did notice, and we'll probably see it in the other readings. How important the intent, the healer or the
Right. Right. Tom, I think your Wi-Fi might have froze for a minute. I think I lost your audio for a couple seconds. Are you still there? Can you hear me okay?
Yes. Can you hear me still?
Yeah. Yeah, sounds good.
Okay.
Yeah, and I appreciate your highlighting that last part in blue on the page, because I think that's super important too, where Kuo said in the last part of the third paragraph, the nature of the entity using the crystal is as important, if not more so, than the nature and the purity of the crystal used. I think that's a really important thing to remember. And I think there was some other passage that I don't think we're going to be looking at today where they basically said the crystal by itself is just basically a rock. It doesn't really do anything. How effective or not the crystal is really depends very much on the nature of the person using it. I think that might be in the next passage. Are you guys ready to move on to another passage and look? Anything you wanted to add before we do that?
The only thing I wanted to share, and I didn't know, Jasmine, I wanted to see if you had heard of this. I stumbled upon something called like a crystal grid, apparently, where crystals can actually be put together in a way that they sort of play off each other to create almost like a grid where intentions can be applied to that grid. And I think that increases the magnification. I was just curious if Jasmine or even Jonathan, if you had heard of that before.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I have one right over there on my Reiki desk that I made. And the way that, real quickly though, the way that I use my crystal grid is I say that I have 12 Reiki helpers because my grid is arranged along the petals of a lotus flower. I have 12 quartz crystals and I have their supporting companions with them. Obsidian, citrine, all various types of crystals with one master quartz crystal in the center. And so the way that I was taught to use it is I set the intention for the crystal grid that the people whose names appear on a piece of paper near the grid will receive continuous healing. And so 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, these people with specific issues, their names are close to the grid and they're getting a small amount of Reiki energy that's being directed, yes, by my intention on a daily basis. We also use that. We also have a world peace Reiki grid that our Reiki master has traveled in an airplane and placed at different points around the planet. And so when I charge my grid, there is a connection between my grid and the other grids out there. So they're also being charged and energy is being dispersed that way. So yes, I have heard of a Reiki grid.
Fairly. Yeah, that's beautiful. I don't have a grid. I like to keep things simple for my tiny little brain. I just like working with one at a time. But I do know others work with grids too. Did you have any follow-ups on that, Tom, that you wanted to add?
No, it's just, I'm never surprised that I learn new things about all of these topics. So that's great. I didn't realize that, grids could be placed up into the sky like that. That's fascinating.
Indeed. That's why I love doing the podcasts and the Zoom sessions. I always learn from the people that we get to meet. Let's take a look at another passage. And this was from June 28th, 1987, where Quo said, "The usefulness of any such technique or device is in direct proportion to the purity and intensity of the seeker to seek knowledge in order to serve others, that the seeker of truth emanates from its very being, and by which it empowers all that it does and all that it is. The desire of the one utilizing such a device as the crystal was that which gave direction and therefore power to accomplish the work in consciousness which the crystal has as its contribution to such a seeker. The crystal structure itself is as you assume. That is, its power exists without a desire from another being to form it, yet such desire and purpose of intention then can direct the movement of energy rather than allow that energy to become diffused by the non-use in a conscious fashion of this energy." I think this is another way of saying what we just said, which is the crystal itself doesn't really have any intentions or any particular power. It's only when it's used by a conscious being as a way of focusing its intentions and channeling its intentions into it, that it's able to magnify that and amplify it. But that part at the top really caught my attention, where they say the usefulness of any such technique or device is in direct proportion to the purity and intensity of the desire to seek knowledge in order to serve others. I think that's a powerful teaching and a powerful lesson to understand, suggesting that the more purely or farther one polarizes towards service to others or service to self, the more power that you can generate or channel through the crystal. Tom, did you have any thoughts on anything in this passage?
Yeah, I thought, it's interesting because I had highlighted that exact sentence as well, especially where it says the desire to seek knowledge in order to serve others. And so that made me think, what, and maybe this is a question for this group, how would we define the consciousness of a crystal? I think that's one question I haven't really been able to get my head around. But it also made me sort of look at these words, because there's a reference to service to others as it relates to this passage. And then, of course, I considered, all right, well, what if someone is service to self and they would want to use the crystals as well? Really going back to the question, well, why would the reference just be service to others here? And then I thought, well, I don't know. I just don't know if, a person who is service to self would necessarily be using crystals to heal another person. I guess it's possible, but I kind of felt like that was probably the reason that it was maybe put that way, because healing, caring for, loving is
Right.
sort of a service to others
Sure.
process.
Yeah, and it's worth noting, if I can cut in for a second, Quo and all of the other entities which have been channeled by our friends at L&L Research are part of a group of planetary entities known as the Confederation of Planets in service of the infinite creator. And they themselves are polarized towards the positive, towards service to others. So I think it's true. I mean, anything that can be used for positive purposes could be used for negative purposes. It's just that they are speaking to presumably an audience that is of service to others' polarity. So that's kind of where their focus is. Otherwise, yes, I'm sure you could use a crystal for harm. You could use crystals as weapons. And I think, as we will see not too long when we get to the passage on Atlantis, that was indeed part of the problems that led to the downfall of Atlantis, the misuse of crystals for service to self purposes rather than service to others.
Yes.
Did you have anything else wanted to add to that? I appreciate your bringing that up, because I'm sure a lot of our viewers were wondering about that as well.
Yeah, I wondered about that, and I thought, okay, and then when we did, like you said, get to the ends of some of these passages, it kind of comes up again. So that's something I noticed as well. And then just the other thing again is just going back to that question, and I'm sort of putting it out there, trying to understand really when working with crystals. If they are just, let's say, stones, or they're just rocks, yet they have a consciousness, and so I wonder if our intentions affect that consciousness that is within the crystal. And it's just a question that we may not be able to answer, but it was just a question that came to mind when reading this particular portion of what you highlighted.
It's interesting you ask, because my first answer was going to be, no, I don't think they have any consciousness. And then I think you reminded me that I just said about 5 minutes ago that earth and air and fire and water do have what is called first density consciousness. So clearly that would be a misstatement. Clearly they have some form of consciousness, but I think what the interpretation I'm getting from this passage, and I'll ask Jasmine, she has different thoughts, is, yeah, they don't really have like intent the same way that a third density or a second density consciousness might have. It seems more of a inert consciousness, for lack of a better word. What do you think, Jasmine? Any thoughts on that? It's a great question. I appreciate your asking it, Tom.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. And it just brings up more questions, actually. So I've read a couple of different versions. first of all, the first one is crystals do not contain human intelligence. I think a lot of us, when we hear consciousness and intelligence, we transpose the two. We think of them as the same thing, and they're absolutely not. So the first thing that I was taught is crystals don't obviously have human intelligence. It can't rationalize, it can't reason. But crystals absolutely contain consciousness, cosmic consciousness. Because at the end of the day, when we really think about it, what on this planet is not cosmic consciousness? So crystals absolutely have a form of consciousness. And, I hope your listeners and your viewers aren't going to be put off by this. But one of the techniques that I learned early on in choosing crystals for our healing work, for healing ourselves and others, is to actually attempt to communicate with the crystal using our hands and using our solar plexus and the energy there. And by setting an intention, which is asking a question, will you work with me in helping and healing others? And using a process that was popularized by Dr. David Hawkins, applied kinesiology, your body will respond to the energy in the crystal that says, yes, I will work with you, or no, I will not work with you. So that is a form of consciousness. May not be human intelligence, but it is consciousness. And one of the things that I was taught at university is, and our teachers really didn't talk too much about the nefarious uses of crystals, but absolutely, if you can, and remember, it's all energy. So there is no good energy, there is no bad energy. It's all energy, but it's the intention of the person using that energy. So yes, you can absolutely use a quartz crystal to amplify your desire to harm someone. But as individuals who walk the path of light, we're pretty much told, yeah, there are ways you can do that. We're not teaching it here. We're not even talking about it, in this particular course. So yes, I think I've heard two things. The other thing I've heard is, yes, crystals are basically rocks. They're just inert matter and they're not going to do anything. But there seems to be overwhelming evidence that different crystals have different resonant vibratory frequencies that do, in fact, attune to our physical bodies and certain places on our bodies. And oddly enough, those places on our bodies happen to be the chakra systems. So much more research.
By the surest of coincidences. Yeah. I think we're going to be getting into that before too long as well. So definitely hold on to that thought. I did want to add a note about the law of responsibility, which for folks who are familiar with the law of one can be summed up by Peter Parker's Uncle Ben as, with great power comes great responsibility. So I believe what they are saying in that first sentence, and that Jasmine was alluding to, was that if you have chosen the service to others path of serving others and you use a crystal to harm people, or use it in a way that is not consonant with the service to others path, there are consequences, just natural consequences, karma that comes up that's not really going to go so well. I assume it goes the same for service to self entities. If you've chosen the path of service to self and you use the crystal to help others, then I don't know. Probably some bad stuff happens to you too, but I don't know. It's not my path, so I don't really care. Can we move on to another passage?
Well,
Anything else on it?
I wanted to share one last thing with that, because I remember reading, I think, Jonathan, it was from one of your, if it was one of your sharings, I'm not sure when or how I got introduced to it, but there was a portion where either Quill or Ra was asked about the use of crystals and what's, the first step. And I remember reading that one of the first steps was sort of like what Jasmine said, was to get to know the crystal. Like to get to know what it looks like, and to get to know, and I can show you this sort of, I don't know if it's focused or not, maybe it's better to do it like that, but sort of get to know the sides, and to get to know the lines, and to get to know everything about your crystal. And somehow that that helps you connect with the crystal. And so I keep mine in my room, and sometimes if I do something silly, I will walk by my crystal and go, sorry, that's that's me. That's me. Now you know.
That's funny. That's funny. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, for sure. It is a partnership. It is a dance of energies, blending of energies. And that's why they said in that previous passage, the nature of the entity using the crystal is as important, if not more, than the nature and the qualities and the shape and the size and the color of the crystal itself. Much appreciated. Let's take a look at crystals and meditation. On October 7th, 2001, Kuo said, "The use of the crystals for enhancing the meditative practice of sending love and light where it is needed is a practice which indeed can be most efficacious. For indeed, the crystals themselves are often referred to as frozen light. The crystal may be held in the hand while the meditation is undertaken. The inner visualization would need to see the crystal and the heart and the third eye, that's your third eye chakra, also known as indigo ray, working in harmony in a synchronized fashion, the thought of the need for healing being held foremost in the mind. Then the crystal may be imaged as being the medium through which the thought would be sent, and the visualization of the recipient of this light, whether it be a planet, a country, or a person, would then be seen to be bathed in this light. Thus the thought or the image would be sent forth and enhanced by the use of the crystal in this fashion." Probably worth noting that there are many different forms of meditation, and meditation can be used for many different purposes. And we did a podcast episode on that. So if you want to learn more about meditation, check it out. I think Jasmine might have been on that episode, now that I think about it. Otherwise, I'm only saying that because this particular passage refers to meditation that's kind of used for healing, for sending love and light. And that's kind of the main purpose of this focus of this passage. Otherwise, I would say I have used quartz crystals, seem to work well in that fashion. I do like holding the crystal in my hand while I'm meditating. Not all the time, just when I feel like sending love and light. I like that you can visualize the recipient of that light as a planet or a country or a person, whatever it is, but visualize that entity in your third eye, your indigo ray, as being bathed in light, and send it love and light. And I think, as in Reiki, you're not sending it your own love and light. You're really just trying to be a channel to allow the purest form of love light from the one infinite creator to flow through you and channeled through that crystal to the recipient of that light. Jasmine, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I do. And I think you're right. You're absolutely right, Jonathan. In Reiki, we never channel our own energy. So when we use crystals in Reiki and in meditation, and let's face it, I'm not sure how other Reiki masters do it, but whenever I'm in a session, it is a meditation. I am really meditating on channeling Reiki energy to the person. One of the tips that I received early on in using crystals for meditation is have a master crystal that you keep in your meditative area. And I do. So in my main meditation area, I have a tall rose quartz crystal. It's a tower. It's a rose quartz crystal tower. And the suggestion that the instructor gave me is that every time you go into that area to meditate, that crystal is absorbing that intention and absorbing the love and the light that you are attempting to share, not only with the entire world, but with yourself. And before long, that crystal gets very attuned to your energy in your meditative space. And it just makes it so much easier for the crystal to activate and amplify whatever intentions that you happen to have. As far as crystals in meditation, on my Reiki desk, I also have a little crystal generator. which I sometimes grab off the Reiki desk when I'm ready to meditate. And it's simply a pyramid, a clear quartz crystal pyramid surrounded by crystals with colors and resonance for the different chakras. So doing a cosmic mudra position, you simply hold the little generator in your hand. And I find that to be helpful. Not sure if other people would or do, but bringing the crystal into the meditative process, I found when I started doing that, it really, really helped my meditation. Because now, again, I have these little crystal friends that all know she's sitting down, she's ready to meditate. Okay, we're going to activate.
Nice. Nice. Yeah, and I hope our viewers don't get the impression that you need to have a crystal in order to meditate effectively or to send love and light to anyone effectively. Not at all necessary. Those meditations are powerful and beautiful in their own way, but I guess it's the difference between playing an acoustic guitar and an electric guitar. Maybe sometimes you just want it a little bit louder. Maybe you just want to amplify it a little bit. In which case, go for it. Tom, any thoughts, reflections to add?
Yeah, that was wonderful. And it called to mind a show that I had watched where a gentleman he was a remote viewer. It was, I think, Joe McMoneagle, one of the well-known remote viewers, and so he was talking, but at one point they asked him, well, where did you go when you remote viewed? And he said, I would go into to a dark room. It was like a square room with a bed, and underneath the bed was a whole, I guess, another bed of salt. And salt is sodium chloride is a crystal as well. So as Jasmine was speaking, it made me think he was probably in there, and every time he went in there, those crystals, those salt crystals, were sort of reactivating, or maybe it was his body was attuning to the bed of crystals that he was on that would allow him to amplify his own efforts in that. But and then really the other thing about this one is just, my own meditation with crystals has really just been an experiment. I just have tried just holding this crystal in my hand when I meditate. I've tried putting it on my head. That it's kind of a big crystal to do that. But I think what I read in some of what you shared, Jonathan, is that it's really just okay to just have it in the room with you. If you want to hold it, you can. And I don't always meditate with it, but it's still a learning experience with it.
For sure. Yeah, I think experimenting is a good word to use. Try different things and pay attention to what seems to have positive effects and negative effects. And I believe we've got a couple passages on that coming up. For now, if you guys don't mind, I wanted to take a little bit closer look at meditation for healing, specifically in the context of Gaia Meditations for Mother Earth. On July 16th, 2005, Quo said, "It is as though you are extremely close to developing a large enough group of groups of entities which together remember who they are, but they are on the verge of being able to firm into crystals that choose to vibrate as one, the love and the light of the one infinite creator. When this is done with enough mass of intelligent, conscious, choice-making entities joining in, there is a speeding up or a multiplication effect. The crystal that each of you is can choose to become a great deal more powerful as commonalities merge entities into groups, and those groups into light sources. Efforts such as this group's Gaia Meditations occurring daily are one such crystalline effort, which has indeed, over a period of your years, begun to affect the planet. Its choice of a non-location oriented daily witness to prayer and meditation on behalf of the planet has created an energy which is common to many points upon, or shall we say close to, your planetary surface, which are yin rather than yang, shall we say, and their energy focus, which have represented or created the opportunity for, shall we say, the infection of larger groups of entities by the enthusiasm felt by individuals in becoming a part of the Gaia meditation. For those who didn't know, Gaia Meditations, you can find descriptions of it on the LNL research page if you go to the homepage and click on Connect and then scroll down to the bottom. Gaia Meditations are something that Jim and Carla started back in 2001, shortly after the attacks on the Twin Towers in New York City, the 9/11 attacks. The group was asking what they could do to help spiritually, metaphysically. And they were told to do meditations, group meditations, try to do them at the same time to bring people together in prayers for Mother Earth and for world peace. So those times have been 3:30 p.m. Pacific time, 6:30 p.m. Eastern time, and have been ongoing pretty much since then. So it is definitely something that's part of our Seattle Law of One study group whenever we meet on our Tuesday, Saturday Zoom sessions. We do Gaia meditations for about 20 minutes for this very same thing. And I have an alarm set on my phone for 3:30 p.m. each afternoon so that I can spend maybe 5 or 10 minutes oming and sending love and light to Mother Earth in the way that we talked about. So I encourage all to do it. I don't think it has to be done at exactly that time, 3:30 p.m. I'm sure it in time, space, it's all the same. But I would also not be surprised if there's something special about people who are making a point of meditating in space time at that same time. So would encourage all to help out with that if you can, now or in the future. Tom, any thoughts on anything here?
Yeah, I think this is such a beautiful passage because it takes the step from the singularity of our discussion about crystals into the larger picture, and the consideration really that we have crystal light bodies that somehow together we can crystallize and share a common intention, share a common love. And I just was sort of thinking through that process and how that happens and how a person and a group of people would sit together and probably have some sort of experience, in a metaphysical sense of sharing a resonance, sharing an intention. And the more that occurs, the more, these Gaia meditations occur, the crystallizing in my mind would be just more of a consistent intention, a consistent crystallization, so to speak, of that process. And I guess it wouldn't necessarily be, and maybe we could speak on this, crystallizing not like something hardens and never is able to change, as much as crystallizing is just sort of harmonizing, and coming into alignment with. And it's beautiful to think that the more that, that love occurs, that focus and intention occurs, then the more it is likely to occur. It creates a real sense of hope. So I really appreciated this passage a lot.
Yeah, and I appreciate your sharing that because I think you're kind of highlighting that part in the first paragraph where they refer to the speeding up or a multiplication effect. Folks who are familiar with the law of one are probably familiar with the law of squares. That just says when groups of people join together for purposes such as this, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. And the more an individual person joins that group, there's a exponential multiplying effect of those prayers and meditations. And I would imagine everybody at this time knows that our Mother Earth could really use some love and light and care in that way. So really encourage all to join in that in whatever way they feel called to. Jasmine, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, I just really wanted to echo what Tom said. I like what he said about harmonizing. The way that I see this when I read this passage is it really sounds like Quo is saying, we as a group of individuals, of entities, our meditations, our prayers, what's really happening is we are attuning ourselves as a group to those higher and finer cosmic vibrations. And of course, we know that the lower densities or the lower vibrations is where you have things like fear and hate and selfishness. The higher and finer vibrations is where you begin to experience love and joy. And so when we come together collectively and meditate, and I don't think it matters really whether it's 3:30 or 6:30, because I think time is just a human construct and it's the intention of what you want to do. And so time is of no consequence. But I think what's happening is we are starting to harmonize to those higher, finer frequencies and vibrations, which only gets us closer and closer to the cosmic. And it also seems that, like Jonathan says, the more of us involved in these types of activities, it just seems to make it easier for others to attune. So if there's only one person, Jonathan Tong, who's meditating on the entire planet, yeah, he's creating an energy field. It's there. But when you have 10,000 people on the planet, look at the size of the energy field that's being created, and it just makes it easier for Tom Luce now to be able to connect and engage.
For sure. And I think that's what Quo was referring to in that last sentence where they said the infection of larger groups of entities by the enthusiasm felt by individuals in becoming a part of the Gaia meditation. As more and more people do that, that energy grows and starts resonating with others, get them awakened and in tune as well. It's a beautiful process. And for sure, I'm sure there are many entities on Earth who really want nothing more than for that not to happen. The entities who really are doing the best they can to keep us divided against each other in a perpetual state of fear and anxiety. They know that if people join together this way, that the whole Earth lightens up, and forces of darkness don't necessarily want that. So yeah, screw them. Let's do it. Any thoughts, questions before we move on to another topic?
So yeah, I had one question, and it's the sentence that says the planet created an energy which is common to many. It's that last paragraph there. Shall we say close to your planetary surface, which are yin rather than yang. And I wanted to get your thoughts on what was meant by that. And I haven't given much thought to the yin and the yang concept really in my spiritual journey, but in this moment I'm thinking, okay, perhaps the yin is aligned with the positive, and the yang would be aligned with the negative. And so what's being said there potentially is that there's an alignment with those people that are service to others more so than the opposite. But was curious what you both thought about that.
I'm glad you brought it up, because I was thinking of that also, and then my thought drifted onto something else. And I wish I had a visual of the yin yang symbol. Hopefully our viewers know it's something that comes from Eastern Taoist traditions, I believe, in Asia, but it's a circle divided into an S shape where one half of it is black, the other half is white. And the section that's white has a little dot in it that's black. The section that's black has a dot in it that's white. And it's really meant to show the polarities, dualistic forces always involved in third density. And yeah, positive and negative is one way to think of it. Dark and light is another way to think of it. I was actually thinking of it as male and female. And I think yin energies would generally be considered female energy, and yang energy would be considered male. And I think it would be fair to say that our world is very much unbalanced towards too much yang male energy and really needing more of the gentle yin female energies. That's my take on it. Jasmine, did you have any thoughts on that? It's another great question from Mr. Thomas.
I think I really don't have a thought other than what you just said, Jonathan. When I saw the yin and the yang, I immediately thought male, female. And, when I hear the yin, when I think about the yin energy, I do think about things like love, compassion, uh, working together, community. When I think of the yang, I think more strength and more, I don't want to say hard, but more determined, more determination. And so that's how I kind of left it. I really don't have an opinion other than that.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. And, again, there's always many different ways to look at anything. So it's not like one way is correct and more than the other. But I would say it is worth noting that our friends in the Confederation, Quo and otherwise, they have said more than a few times that many of the problems that we have on Earth involving war and bellicosity and aggression really are because of an imbalance of male energies, and that especially at this time of moving into the fourth density of unconditional love. What we really do need is to balance that more with feminine female energies. Which reminds me, we did a podcast episode on that. It's called Divine Feminism. Check it out. Not that many views. It's one of the lowest viewed videos we've got. I'm not sure why.
Well,
but
I'm going to check it out. I'm going to check that out.
Otherwise, let's talk about crystals and healing. On May 10th, 1987, Quo said, if an entity wishes to accelerate the process of evolution, the process of utilizing catalyst in the daily round of activities, and gleaning from that catalyst the bias in consciousness towards service, then the entity may seek to share that quality of polarization with others by means of the healing that is possible in the use of the crystal. This healing is a process which is first used upon the self as the entity gathers the experience of its journey and allows the fruit of this experience to move through its being, to enter into the crystal and resonate in harmony with it and become amplified by this harmonic resonance and move to an other self that is in need of the kind of balancing of energy centers which your peoples term healing. As the crystal is utilized for the enhancing, the balancing, or the healing of the energy centers of self or other self, it must, however, be understood that there is the attendant responsibility to utilize the increased energy patterns or intensified patterns in a manner congruent with the chosen polarity. For indeed, the enhanced experience carries the responsibility to be utilized in a manner that is as pure an offering of love to the one creator as the seeker is able to make. Another reminder, I believe, of the law of responsibility, that as you acquire more spiritual power, there is a natural law of the universe that kind of requires you to use that in a manner that is consistent, consonant with the polarity that you have chosen. Again, we're always referring to the service to others, positive polarity in this podcast. Folks who have chosen the other path probably want to find another podcast that speaks to them more. It is, for sure, an equally valid path. It is not that the service to others path is considered better than the service to self path. They are both considered valid paths to the creator by Quo and Ra and our friends in the Confederation. It is just a longer, more difficult path that requires you to shut off your green ray and really not give a fuck about anybody else, and really to just think about yourself a minimum of 95% of the time in order to progress. And that's not a path that I think most of us are really able to follow. Tom, did you have any thoughts on anything here?
Well, I find this, to be very interesting as well. And I that first sentence that you read about the entity, and it really sort of just goes into the conversation about the importance of catalysts in all of our lives, and especially in a crystal healer who would want to probably do the best that they could with their catalyst and with balancing their own chakras to allow them the ability to heal others in a similar way. And then I thought the other part that was interesting was, again, they talk about, the harmonic resonance with the crystal for the healing, which kind of goes back to to our topic of the crystals not changing the way they exist as much as, we are attuning and aligning and harmonizing ourselves with the crystal to use our own intentions and to amplify our own intentions for healing. But the purity of intention is such a fascinating and deep concept. How does one have how do you get to the purity of an intention? It's really a very focused state of being. It feels like it comes right from the heart, but it's just, that was just my thoughts on that one.
Yeah, beautifully said. It reminds me of that first part, which I thought was really important in the first paragraph that's in blue on your screen, where they say, this healing is a process which is first used upon the self as the entity gathers the experience. So they're saying, before you think about healing others, it really starts with yourself, because if you don't have the open channels and if you haven't healed yourself, you're really not going to be able to heal anybody else. And that's pretty important, I would say. Jasmine, anything to add?
Yeah, this one is kind of an interesting one for me because in my process, I've had several teachers, and a couple of them have some conflicting ideas and thoughts, and so I've come to what works best and what resonates most with me. I do fully believe that if you yourself are not on the path of light, first of all, and that is a requirement for us, you must be on the path of light. If you're not solidly on the path of light, and if you have not dealt with some of the energetic and karmic issues in your own energy field, I just don't know how effective you are when it comes to channeling healing energy, even if you use the supports and augmentations of crystals. So that's not to say that if I have a headache today, I can't do a Reiki session with Jonathan and be effective using my crystals. But if my headache is because I'm holding on to negativity now for 24, 48, 72 hours about something that my husband said to me, and I'm thinking about what a terrible, horrible, lousy, crappy person he is. Okay, Jonathan, now I'm going to do a Reiki session.
I think I gotta wash my hair. Sorry.
Yeah, I just don't think that works.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
So I think it is, for me, it is really important that I do check-ins with myself regularly, that I do self-care every other day. Where are you at mentally? Where are you at emotionally? What's going on with you? And making sure that I stay a clear and open channel. One of the things that we say, one of the mantras that we use when we're charging our crystals is that we do ask that we be an open channel through which divine Reiki energy may flow. So that's the intention that I use when I sit down. And I think it's just very important. But at the same time, I do also recognize what another teacher said, that you can actually compartmentalize. So if I have an issue, like in July, when my brother just suddenly passed away, all right, does that mean that I can't do a Reiki session until I've worked through that entire grief process? No, it doesn't. You do have the ability to compartmentalize by setting your intention that I'm hurting right now from this grief, and I have not dealt with that grief, and I know that, but I'm putting it off to the side, and now I'm fully invested for the next 45 minutes in this.
Sure. Yeah, that all makes perfect sense to me. And if one was, just a normal MD doing gastroenterology or something like that, then your energy level probably wouldn't really make that much difference. But if you're doing metaphysical work and you're doing energy work, then I would think everything that you said is much more important. And I know Quo has spoken many times about the importance of unblocking those energy centers so that that energy, that prana, that life force can flow freely through all of your lower chakras into the higher chakras where you're probably doing the energy work. And that involves, yeah, if you have issues, problems with individual other selves or groups of other selves or with yourself, then yeah, that can block that energy and prevent you from being a good channel for that creator's love. Can we take a look at another passage, which I'm kind of curious about? I would love to get your thoughts on. This one I found a little bit puzzling, mainly because I'm not really an energy healer. This was from Quo on May 14th, 1989. They said, the smaller and more commonly used crystal gems may be utilized by one who seeks to be of service as that which you call the healer. For when the crystal has been chosen according to those qualities which are known to be a part of each gemstone, the appropriately selected crystal may be charged or enhanced by the desire of the one serving as healer, in order that the interruption of the energy pattern of the one to be healed might be achieved. The interruption of the energy pattern would allow for another configuration, loosely known to your peoples as health, to be chosen according to the newer mental understanding of the one to be healed, realizing that it has learned what was necessary from the previous configuration of mind that produced the diseases, shall we say, within the mind-body-spirit complex. Thus, the crystal may be seen as similar to a magnification device and an intensification device that may aid the healer in an attempt to offer its services. I'm interpreting this as meaning that someone who has some sort of disease that could be understood to be some sort of energy configuration, and that when someone is trying to do, Reiki healing or some other energy healing, you could be using the crystal basically to disrupt that energy pattern with that entity's consent and allow them to choose a different configuration of energy, which would be more healthy. Does that sound about right to you, Jasmine? Do you see it a similar way or a different way?
I see it exactly that way. Any disease in the body, it's been said that any disease in the body is a result of disorganized energy in our human energy field, the HEF. And so certainly if you have a condition, a headache or whatever, that's just energy that's disordered and disorganized. And so by using the crystal set with intention, you're helping to reorganize that energy. We use the term polarity as well, but it means something different. In the human energy field, if you look at the Taurus human in the human energy field, energy is supposed to flow like this. But then what happens when it flows like this? Usually discomfort, illness, and disease. And so you use your crystal along with a couple of other techniques we use. You use the crystal to get the energy flowing like this again. And so if the energy field at the heart, the physical heart, is supposed to vibrate, and I'm just using numbers here, at 59 hertz, and it's actually vibrating at 25 hertz, you're probably about ready to have a heart attack. But what you do is you use your crystal to bring the energy of the heart back into alignment, to normalize it and balance it with what a heart is supposed to vibrate at, 59 hertz.
Nice. Yeah, thank you. It reminds me, the word disease sounds like dis-ease, something that's not happening with ease or smoothness or fluidity. So Jasmine, am I assuming correctly that one would never attempt to do this kind of work on another entity without their permission, without their asking for that help?
Absolutely. We have very, very strict rules that we should follow, that we're encouraged to follow. And I have to say, and I don't really know how my teacher knows this for sure, but we were taught that if you attempt to force a healing on someone, if you misuse Reiki energy, for example, and there are other forms of energy healing, it's actually what we call spiritual malpractice. Now, what one of my teachers said is that if you misuse these techniques that she's about to show you, you run the risk of losing your attunement to the energy. Now, once again, how she knows this, I'm not sure, but sure, if you try to force healing on somebody, that's spiritual malpractice. And you could run the risk of losing your own connection to this energy and lose your ability to channel.
Not surprising at all. And
That
I would think it fair to say that the healing is just more likely to be effective if the recipient of the healing has asked for it and is open to it and is wanting to receive that
if
light,
what
love,
it,
energy that you're sending them.
the other school of thought says too, we have to remember whenever we connect with a person, we're actually connecting with with their HEF through their higher self. So if their higher self knows for a fact that this individual, Tom, needs to experience this physical catalyst in order for him to grow, then Tom's higher self may reject and refuse the energy or the healing. And that's okay. One of the things that we are taught, though, is that just like sending healing energy to Mother Earth, to Gaia, there is actually a meditation and a mantra that we do. We say, I choose to send divine Reiki energy to everyone around me continuously. We say that 3 times in 3 repetitions. And so that way, anybody who's near us or around us will get a little bit of Reiki healing. And we don't consider that spiritual malpractice because, again, if all of the entities in the Walmart who I'm encountering when I'm going up and down the aisles, if their higher selves don't want the energy because their higher selves know that they need to experience whatever negativity they're feeling, then their higher selves just won't let it come through.
Right, right. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Thank you. And I appreciate the kind of focusing on each of us as energy bodies and energies beings. I know anyone who's looking at my mug on the camera right now is thinking that this is who I am, or each of us are. But yeah, I think Quo has said they see us as energy bodies, probably those different color energy centers that we saw, and each one shining in a different way, different combination of colors. It's a beautiful thing to think about. And I've tried to make a habit of that, of looking at people on TV or whatever as energy bodies rather than the things that we see in the mirror on the screen. Tom, did you have anything to add?
I do, and I was thinking as Jasmine was speaking about spiritual malpractice and how you can detune yourself. It reminded me of some of the raw channelings where the negative entity was hanging around, and there was some sort of interaction where if that negative entity was around positive entities for too long of a period of a time, it would depolarize itself, right? And it sort of so what you were talking about did remind me of that. And then going back to the reading that Jonathan did of the paragraph, the second paragraph, I thought it was, and we're touching on it, I thought it was really interesting where it says, according to the newer mental understanding of the one to be healed, realizing that it has learned what was necessary from the previous configuration of mind. So sort of saying that, I would imagine, Jasmine, you could do a Reiki healing or a crystal healing on someone, but if they're not necessarily balanced or beyond learning what they needed to learn, I don't know if they would, those other energies would just reappear. It's sort of like chiropractics in the sense where you can get realigned, But if you're something overall, like, the big picture of your body, if it's misaligned, I think you can just slip out of alignment from, in your spine or wherever. So it kind of made me think about that, the importance of using the catalyst, and understanding what there is to be learned, I guess, through meditation and through the balancing process. I think that's really important if you wish to be healed using crystals and or even Jasmine's Reiki process. I think that's very important. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, and once again, you're bringing up really interesting points and questions. Would you agree with that, Jasmine? If a entity really just isn't ready to let go of that disease energy, then no amount of crystal healing you do is necessarily going to work.
I think, yeah, both of you are absolutely right. And so that's why we say we don't take any credit. That's why we're not called healers. I mean, some people may, but I don't consider myself a healer because we take no credit for the healing. It's you that's doing the healing. And we also don't accept any responsibility if you're not healed, because as Tom alluded to, you're absolutely correct. I mean, I can use all of the crystals I have here in my arsenal, my wand, my pyramids. I can do an 1.5-hour session on you because you're experiencing pain in your shoulders. But if the minute you leave my studio or in the call with me, if you go right back out and start doing those same things again, and that is being rude, being negative, taking on way too much for any one person, all of the things that tend to settle in the body around the shoulders, no amount of healing that I can do anyway is going to help you. And so, again, a responsible person, I'm not sure if Quo talks about this, but a responsible person brings everything to bear when they're working with an individual, including explaining to the individual that you may have some things going on right now with you energetically and spiritually that really need to happen. And it's a growth process for you. And so, please don't be discouraged and disappointed if you don't experience this amazing balancing and reharmonization and healing. So you're absolutely right. Perfect.
Well said. Yeah, thank you both so much. I am enjoying learning so much from the conversation. I did want to note that we've been going for about 1 hour and 20 minutes. So for our viewers who are finding that anything longer than an hour is really more than they can do, feel free to hit the stop button anytime you want. Put this in your watch later folder and come back to it and watch it in parts or whenever. And this is, of course, why we divide all of these episodes into chapters so that you can skip ahead or skip back to wherever you want if you don't want to watch or listen to the whole thing all the way through. Otherwise, if it is okay with you, panelists, I would like to talk a little bit about precautions. On February 28th, 2009, this passage has been edited for brevity. A person named D, whose name starts with a D, asked, "Is there any detrimental effect that could happen if a quartz crystal is used for meditation very often?" Quo responded by saying, "In general, the tendency of the use of the crystal for meditation is positive. We would make 2 conditions upon that totally positive effect. The first is that energy bodies, just as people in their physical form, vary tremendously. What is meat and drink to one energy body will be poison to another. Consequently, there is no way to generalize when speaking of the use of crystals. The proximity of the crystal to the person and the duration of that time in which the crystal and the person are in close connection vary in terms of the optimal use from person to person. Consequently, we would encourage each who uses crystals to be fully aware of the effects of that crystal and to monitor the self to be sure that there is not an overdose, shall we say, of proximity or longevity of connection to the crystal. Do not assume that a crystal shall be helpful or unhelpful, but rather experiment with it and build your intelligence with personal experience. The other consideration which might limit the usefulness of a quartz crystal in meditation is its shape. Often such crystals are crafted into pyramids, and when crystals are in this particular shape, they are more powerful because of the geometry of the energy field created by the shape. Such changes to the crystal create a more powerful crystal. At the same time, that power can become toxic if kept within the energy field over what in your time would be 20 or 30 minutes. With these two caveats, my brother, the use of the quartz crystal in meditation is encouraged. That's a nice callback to what Tom said, I think, earlier about experimenting. Don't assume that a crystal is good or bad. Experiment, try different ones, focus on your intentions, think about how you may or may not just feel a vibe with this particular crystal, and pay attention to any positive or negative effects that you might experience. Tom, did you have any thoughts, reflections, anything to add here?
This reminded me of when in the Ra channelings, when Dawn was asking Ra just about the pyramid structure in itself, and whether a pyramid had a metaphysical effect on an entity, if it was a small one or if it was a big pyramid. And then so reading this and learning that, oh yeah, there's definitely a magnification effect using certain sacred shapes, like a pyramid, like this shape here. And so when I was, like I said earlier, when I was out looking at some crystals, I went on a crystal splurge. I was really trying to find pyramids, which it was a little harder to find, but I thought that was interesting. But yeah, it really goes back to, I guess it's so important to be self-aware when working with crystals, to really, it must take some time, I would think, for a person working with crystals, using crystals, to really get to know the feeling that the crystal is generating, or even if it's beyond 20 to 30 minutes and you're starting to feel weary or you're starting to feel tired, maybe to take a break. I thought that was very, very useful information. And yeah, it sort of took me back to that Ra channeling from a reading I had done.
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing that up. I believe there was some other passages where Dawn was asking about putting small pyramids under the pillow, specifically under the head. And I believe Jim McCarty has said a few times in our sessions that he does that also. And I'm guessing it's because the pyramid shape kind of acts as a funnel for that spiraling upward light. And so that light is really concentrated as it comes out the apex of the pyramid and putting it under your head. Yeah, I could imagine it's really sending a whole lot of energy into your indigo ray or whatever.
Right, because the crystal is already magnifying it, and then you get a pyramid shape and you're magnifying the magnification. So yeah, I guess you have to be just aware of that, I suppose.
For sure. Which is why they specifically recommended not doing that for more than 20 or 30 minutes, I believe. Don't fall asleep with it on your head, or you might have a raging headache when you wake up.
I have done that, yeah.
Yeah. Jasmine, anything to add?
Just that one cautionary tale that I have, one bad experience actually I had with my crystal is, as I said, this one here is really my workhorse, my very best crystal friend. I wear her almost every day. And what I found was that there was a period, I'd say probably about a year ago, where I literally never took it off except to shower, and then I put it back on. And so, I'm visiting people, I'm going to the grocery store, I'm doing all these things, and I never ever took this crystal off, which means I never cleansed it and I never charged it with positive intention. And then all of a sudden, one day, it was just negative and I was nasty. and I felt negative, and it's like, what is again, I have to sit down, what's going on? And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, popped into my mind, your crystal. My crystal? What do you mean, my crystal? And then it occurred to me, you've been out and about shopping and visiting people, all kinds of other negative energy. And remember, the crystal does have the ability to absorb energy. That's the only reason that we charge our crystals in Reiki. And I never cleansed it. And so the minute I did that, I took it off and I put it in a salt and selenite bath for 24 hours and put my crystal back on, and then happy vibes again. And so that would be the one negative experience that I've had with crystals. Other than that, yeah, I think the expectation, you read a lot on the internet about buy this particular crystal and all of these wonderful things are going to happen. You're going to get rich and you're going to fall in love and yada, yada. A lot of that I think is just hype. It really is. And if you have the ability to do it, it really is going and touching the crystal and getting an agreement, getting into connection with that crystal and determining whether or not it will work with you for the purpose that you have intended.
Well said. Yeah, I always appreciate the personal sharings of personal experiences people have had with crystals, and I hope our viewers are getting something from that too. Speaking of cautionary tales, this would probably be a good time to talk about crystals and Atlantis. On May 25th, 1980, the social memory complex known as Latwii, who is 1/3 of the social memory complexes that make up Quo, said, "You must understand that as one disciplines the personality and becomes aware of one's true nature, one begins to achieve powers and can come into attunement with crystals for weal or for woe, to heal or to destroy. The crystals were used to a very large extent in the civilization which you know of as Atlantis. They were also misused in the end. As you proceed with your own seeking, and as you find yourself becoming a more powerful personality, keep in mind the responsibility for good or for evil that you carry within you, for you must always make that choice." Again, another callback to the law of responsibility and the natural law that you use crystals, use the power in a way that is consonant with the polarity that you have chosen. Quo has spoken many times about Atlantis, and anyone who has read Dolores Cannon or Edgar Cayce or other accountings of Atlantis probably knows that, yeah, the misuse of crystal technology is much of what led to the downfall of Atlantis. And as anyone who watches this podcast knows, we had a podcast episode on Atlantis. It was number 12, and we went into great depth and detail there, and I encourage people to check it out. Otherwise, yeah, just know that Atlantis is not just a thing of the past. It is something that apparently had a huge impact, not just on our distant past, but has continued to all the way up to present day, and that much of what we are experiencing now could be said to be reliving the karma of what has happened at Atlantis, including use of crystals. Jasmine, did you have anything you wanted to add on this passage? Or on Atlantis?
Well, when I really don't know that much about Atlantis, and I'm sorry, I haven't watched the podcast yet. The only thing that I would say is, again, all the teachers that I've had really do caution you about the use of crystals for nefarious purposes, but for whatever reasons are not really interested in going into any detail to tell you the who, what, where, when, and how, because again, you're children on the path of light. You really don't need the details. But I do imagine that, yes, crystals could be used quite effectively in some of the things that we do, not only in the Reiki, but also in Rosicrucianism, where crystals could be used for nefarious purposes to amplify your desires to harm or to hurt. I would just advise that don't worry about it, just don't do it. Pure and simple. Again, I have some crystals, and I have been told by a Reiki master, a couple of the crystals I have, because of their cut and their shape and their configuration and their size, are very, very powerful crystals that are used only to help and heal. So I'm really not too concerned about how they could hurt individuals. Never learned it, don't even care to do it, don't really care to talk about it.
Indeed. Yeah. Yeah, and as our friends in the Confederation have said many times, most people aren't really polarized that far to service to others or service to self, positive or negative. They really just kind of keep swinging back and forth because they really aren't aware that it makes a difference or so. And so it's easy for people to think of maybe using crystals for their own selfish desires or gain. Maybe not necessarily to hurt anybody even, but maybe, I don't know, get rich, get wealthy, do something to enhance one's personal power, which is, I guess, not necessarily good or bad, but it's not really helping you polarize towards service to self, which means it's really not going to help you progress in your evolution, as I believe everyone who came here came to do. Did you have anything to add, Tom?
Well, that makes me think about just the importance of of setting an intention to serve others in what we in many of the things we do, through whether it's meditation or obviously healing, using crystals to heal. And it kind of also brings to mind a larger concept that I think everybody has talked about, which is, how does power transform a person? How does access to power, I guess an example would be a politician who makes promises and then maybe gets into power, and things can change. They can be influenced. I think that's important to consider. I think those of us that are service to others, we have loving hearts, and I think for me, my only fear of using crystals would be that I would use it wrong. I would make a mistake with how I'm using it, maybe, use it for too long, like we talked about. But it also just sort of reiterates the fact that crystals are neutral in themselves, and that they can be used, like it says here, for weal or for woe, to heal or to destroy.
As can anything else in the third density illusion, be it computers or firearms or whatever.
Yeah.
Why don't we go ahead and take a look at one last couple of set of passages before we wrap things up. Specifically, let's talk about self as crystal. On March 18th, 2001, Quo said, "The main service of each of you is the service of being yourself. For when you are most truly and deeply yourself, when your heart is open and vibrating in its fullness, you become a crystal capable of receiving energy, transmuting energy, and releasing energy into the Earth's sphere. Many of you from other planets came here specifically to do this. It is a simple process. You breathe in, you breathe out. You allow the truth to flow through you." I really love this passage, and I had many other similar passages that I had to pick through where they really refer to us as crystalline entities. And I just chose this one because it was the shortest and simplest, seems, in making the point. But yeah, I love the idea that each of us, because we're always taking in that prana, that chi, that life force, and so on, we are ourselves crystals, and we are capable of taking in that energy and blessing it, giving it our blessing, and sending it forth out into Mother Earth and to creation. And in many ways, they're saying that's the best way to be of service to others. You don't have to worry about what other outer things you need to do in order to be of service. Just being yourself, who you are on the deepest level, and taking that energy and sending it out in your own unique way is really the best way to be of service to others. It's a beautiful, encouraging message, I would think, at these times. Man, I forgot where we are in the order. Tom, any thoughts on this?
Well, thank you for sharing this, because this was really this was helpful for me, and it was really healing, because I will find myself at times with a list of things to do, and if I don't do this list of things, and from a spiritual standpoint, oh, I need to study this, I need to learn this, I have to get more crystals, and all those things can sometimes take me away from what I think is being discussed here, which is just the simple process of being ourselves. And I love that it just is like you breathe in and you breathe out, and you just allow the energy to flow through you. It really takes it down to just a beautiful visualization of how we can exist, without all the lists or the things to do or the shoulds. So I really appreciate that, because I think this is something that I'll take with me and sort of focus on to help me to relax.
Yeah, what a great word right there. Yeah, I found it really encouraging too. And I know a lot of folks who are watching this probably think, well, do I have to be a healer or a channel, or what sort of great acts of service can I do to graduate, to move on, to grow? And they're saying it doesn't matter. Whatever you're doing right now, as long as you're doing it with an open heart and allowing that Creator's love to flow through you, there's no greater service to others you can do. What a beautiful, encouraging thought. Jasmine, anything to add?
No, other than I absolutely love this paragraph. And again, for me, it was very validating, because we're taught to be very intentional. Simple meditation, a simple mantra once a day or twice a day, in the morning, at night, where you consciously say, and you set the intention that I send Reiki continuously to all those who need it. And do that, for a week, 2 weeks, and you become a beacon. You become a beacon of light. And if that's your intention, then everywhere you go, effortlessly, you're spreading love, and you're spreading light, and you're spreading healing energy. So again, this was very validating, to know that maybe what I was taught before is actually correct.
Guess my teacher wasn't an idiot after all. Yeah. That's great. I love tying it in with square breathing. Square breathing is something that Jim McCarty said that Carla shared with him in a dream shortly after he passed. Square breathing is a practice that's used in white magic traditions as well, with the Brotherhood of the Golden Dawn, I believe. Square breathing, or box breathing, consists of inhaling for 4 counts, holding it for 4 counts, exhaling for 4 counts, and just resting for 4 counts. And I'm sure it can be used for a number of different practices or purposes, but I like doing it for this purpose. Like when I'm listening to music, and I'm listening to music a lot, I'm usually listening to music that's got a 4/4 count to it. So I have taken to dancing or just listening to it and just thinking, first 4 counts, I'm receiving and holding, and then I'm holding and blessing, and then I'm blessing and sending out to the world, and then I'm resting. So when I just do that repeatedly over and over, now when I'm in the car and I'm just listening to music, I'm square breathing, and I'm intentionally, consciously taking in that energy, blessing it, and sending it forth. And that's a way that I can do this on a more frequent basis than just meditating or something. So
That's great.
I don't know if that's going to work for anybody else, but it works really well for me.
I'm going to try it.
So, yeah. And we'll do another episode on breath work sometime. Otherwise, for now, how about one last passage here? And on May 5th, 2002, Quo said, "Each of you is an unique crystal then, which can allow the light to flow into the earth plane in just such and such a way that is unique to you. And when your heart is open and the light is flowing through you, and you feel transparent to that energy, then it is that the most beautiful light of all colors, depending upon the personalities involved, is able to move into that grid that this instrument has sometimes called the Christ grid, and which others have called the grid of unconditional love, or the Buddha. This grid is that web of light that pattern of love that is beginning to stabilize fourth density upon your planetary sphere. Each of you is doing tremendous work for those who shall come after you, sowing seeds of light and seeds of love, whose blossoms you shall not see, for you shall move on. Yet those who come after you will be able to do as they do because of reaping the harvest that you now sow with each loving thought and each contact made in love and in light. Really cannot emphasize this enough, that all of these passages that we've read came through the process of channeling, and that the person who was saying these words, again, really didn't know what words were going to come out before the end of one sentence and the beginning of another. So to see everything so coherent and so beautiful and so full of love and wisdom, I mean, I don't know if these entities are extraterrestrial or they're angelic or if they're all just coming from some deep subconscious part of the channel's mind, but wherever they're coming from is just a really, really beautiful place. And I always come away feeling more loving and more compassionate and more inspired. And I love how everyone who's on Earth right now, you had one mission, and that was to live, to exist. Just keep breathing in, breathing out, and just your being here and radiating that love as much as you can. You are, you're planting the seeds for those who will come after us and making it easier for that heaven on earth that we're hoping to happen, to take root. What a beautiful thought. Jasmine, anything to add? Any thoughts on this?
I really can't add anything to this. This is such a beautiful passage. It just resonates with so many things that I've thought and believed for many years. I particularly like the idea, again, of each of you is an unique crystal. And the idea that no matter who you are, no matter where you are, no matter how important you think you are or how important you think you're not, you do have a part to play. And there, I've said for years, there are no extra people. All of us are needed. And I just hope and I just pray that many more of us will step on the path of light, because when you step on the path of light, then you start to thinking in such a way that you place out there in the cosmos, in the ether, the thoughts that bring this new world about. And I just love it. It's a beautiful passage.
Oh, indeed. Yeah, I appreciate that uniqueness part too. Tom, anything to add? Any thoughts, reflections?
I second what both of you had said. This is such a beautiful passage, and it's such a beautiful way to wrap up our conversation. And it just feels like it just feels like love is emanating from this statement, and it really got me in touch with the love that Quo has for us, and just the affirmation that is shared here to us is just so fulfilling, and it touches my heart. And it's very nice to consider that that what we're doing today is something that reaps a harvest long after we aren't here. There's just so much about this statement. I agree that it's beautiful. And I thought to myself, well, this might be a great way to start my days, reading this in the morning. It's beautiful.
Yeah, I think everyone finds passages that just really resonate deeply with them. And a lot of people, I think, print them out and put them on their bathroom mirrors or wherever it is they're going to look to see. And I have a couple for sure. And it's definitely a great way to bring things to a close. So where do we go from here? This is the part of the episode where we try to think of, out of all the things we've been talking about for fairly close to 2 hours now, what are some good takeaway lessons for our viewers? I would say, if I was going to come up with a list, if you can think of crystals, they're basically as amplification or magnification devices. That's pretty much what we've been talking about. They can be used for meditation. They can be used for healing. And their power is proportionate to the purity of a user's polarization, meaning the more purely you are polarized in service to others, the more power or energy you will be able to generate. And presumably that applies to the service to self path as well. Which brings us again to the law of responsibility. It means it would be important to remember that if you choose to use crystals, that you are responsible for using them in a manner consistent with the service to others or service to self path that you have chosen. And there are consequences to not using them responsibly. And lastly, maybe the most important thing to remember is that you're a crystal, and that all of this is really more about you than about the crystal. It's your nature and the nature of your intentions that you put into the crystal that are really going to make the biggest difference. And if you want to do cool, magical things, then there is no greater power in the universe than love. That's the most powerful magic there is. Tom, anything you want to add? Any takeaway lessons of your own you want to add before we have a little pop quiz?
Just that last one really resonates with me. Number 5, that we are crystals. I thought that was. I was thinking that as you were reading through the other 4, and it was nice to see that you had placed that there. And so I'm just really grateful for each of you sharing your thoughts. And yeah, I will let you know how it goes with my new crystals when they arrive. Just let you know how it goes.
Would love to. Yeah, really enjoyed having you here. This is your first time as a panelist, and hopefully, presumably not the last. Jasmine, any takeaway lessons you want to add? Any last thoughts, reflections before we have a pop quiz?
Yeah, one last thought that I have for listeners who are thinking about crystals and commiserating over the fact that they don't know enough about crystals, I would just say they really are great companions. Try one, get a quartz crystal, and just keep it with you. Think thoughts of love and unity and peace as you hold your crystal. That's really all you need to do.
The intentions really are the key thing. As long as you are thinking about how you can use it in service to others, to help others, everything will be fine, I would think. And thank you so much, panelists, for being here. I've really enjoyed the conversation. Love the questions, love the responses, love the learning that I've gotten from both of you. Thank you so much. But it is time for a pop quiz. Pop quizzes, of course, are meant to be a fun way to add some levity and laughter to our otherwise serious conversations about spirituality and metaphysics, and maybe a fun way to find law of one connections in pop culture. So since today's episode was about crystals, it seems only fitting that we should have a pop quiz about one of the most popular TV shows and series that was about crystals, specifically crystal meth. And I'm referring, of course, to the record-setting series known as Breaking Bad. Did either of you guys ever watch any of this series?
Only the first episode. I'm in trouble.
I got about 20 minutes in, and then I thought, I'm not into this. But it's super popular. Did you watch any of this, Jasmine?
I plead the fifth.
Nice. I like it.
Yeah, I watched. I watched it. Yeah, I watched it.
The whole thing? All 5 seasons?
Oh no, I didn't know there were 5 seasons. I think I abandoned it for some reason, but I watched it. I thought it was interesting. It was really sad. It's just it's just different world.
Yeah, for sure. I would say from a law of one perspective, to me, as somebody who didn't watch more than 20 minutes of the first episode, but from what I gather from talking to other people, it's really kind of a great story of somebody who starts off on the service to others path and then somehow starts wandering into gray areas and ends up going pretty far down the service to self path, committing great acts of violence. For those viewers who haven't seen it, Bryan Cranston is the star. And he plays Walter White, a guy who starts off as a high school chemistry teacher, very gentle, mild-mannered, really good person, but he discovers that he has terminal cancer. And in order to provide better for his family that he's going to be leaving behind, other than a public school teacher's salary, he decides to make and sell crystal meth in order to raise funds, because I guess a GoFundMe campaign wasn't out of the question, I suppose. But he ends up getting involved with the drug underworld and becomes a drug lord himself, and there's a lot of violence in there and all that stuff. So there you go. But for what it's worth, I mean, the series won 16 Emmys, 2 Golden Globe Awards, 2 Critics' Choice Awards, 4 Television Critics Association Awards. Bryan Cranston, the star, won 4 Emmys. Co-stars Aaron Paul and Anna Gunn won 3 and 2 Emmys, respectively. In 2013, Breaking Bad entered the Guinness Book World of Records as the most critically acclaimed TV show of all time. In other words, did pretty well in pop culture. So panelists, I am going to ask you 3 multiple choice questions about this record-setting TV series. See how many you can get right. As always, the points don't matter. The point is to have fun. If you learned something and had fun, then you won. And folks watching on video, feel free to say your answers out loud because we can hear you through the screen. Are you guys ready for your first question?
Ready.
Yeah.
Right. Your first question. Who did network executives want to play the Walter White character instead of Bryan Cranston? Was it A, Matthew Broderick, B, John Cusack, or C, Josh Brolin?
John Cusack?
It's a good guess.
My guess is I was going to guess Matthew Broderick.
Good guess. Well, both of you are half right. The correct answer is A and B.
Oh, nice.
I never said that wasn't an option. Jasmine, you've been on this. You should know well enough. All answers are possible. Could be all of the above, could be none of the above, could be any combination of the above, because that's just how this game works. Apparently, yeah, Bryan Cranston was not well known when the series first kicked off, and he was really mainly known as a comedic actor. He was the father in the oh man, I'm blanking on what series he was in, but it was a family sitcom, not playing the role that you would think of for here. So the executives wanted a bigger star like Matthew Broderick or John Cusack, but they both turned down the role, and they got the dad from Malcolm in the Middle. That was the series.
That was it. Yep, there you go.
And he did a great job transforming from a very benevolent STO character into a badass STS character, for sure. Are you ready for your next question?
Ready.
Who taught Bryan Cranston and Aaron Paul, his co-star, shown on screen, how to cook crystal meth? Was it A, a member of the Drug Enforcement Agency, or DEA, B, a guy they found on the street near the studio, or C, a family member of Bryan Cranston's?
The first one seems too obvious. So I'm going to go with C, a family member.
I
Yes.
think it was a guy they found on the street. So I'm going to go with B.
Good guess. Sometimes the obvious one is the best one to go for. It was, in fact, a member of the Drug Enforcement Agency. Although I had a great time trying to think of the other 2 choices there, for sure. Yeah, because of the show's subject matter, the show's creators thought it was only right to inform the Drug Enforcement Administration, of what they were making and invite them to help. So Cranston apparently said in an interview, and I'm quoting him now, "We informed them with all due respect and consideration that we're doing this show, and would you like to be a part of it in a consultancy in order to make sure we get it right? They had the choice to say, we don't want anything to do with it, but they saw that it might be in their best interest to make sure that we do it correctly. So DEA chemists came on board as consultants and taught Aaron Paul and me how to make crystal meth." Although it is worth noting, the show's creators did take responsibility to make sure that they were not, in fact, showing viewers how to make crystal meth.
I was just going to say,
So
yeah.
they did make sure to leave out critical steps or,
Right.
distort it enough so that somebody could not actually do it from watching the show.
That's smart.
Yeah. Hilarious. Are you ready for your last question?
Sure.
I got my crystal and I'm going to use this one.
That's cheating. That's cheating. You can ask your higher self, though. Last question. What did they use as a stand-in for crystal meth? Was it A, rock candy, B, rock salt, or C, or C, rocks?
Rock salt.
Good guess.
I agree. I'm going to go with rock salt.
Good guess. Yeah, as it turns out, the two characters were not making just ordinary crystal meth, which would be clear. Basically, they were making designer meth, which was actually blue, as shown on your screen. So, as it turns out, the series was filmed in Albuquerque, and there is actually a lady in Albuquerque known as the Candy Lady who sells blue rock candy that they basically used as crystal meth. So, free advertising for the Candy Lady in Albuquerque, New Mexico. You're welcome. But how funny is that, huh?
That's our sponsor.
This episode was sponsored by Crystal Meth. Yeah. And the rock candy. Well, you guys did great. It always makes me happy when nobody gets any of these correct. If anybody gets more than one of these correct, I'm pissed. So you guys did great. You're the best panel I've ever had on this podcast, and I say that to every panel, but this time I really mean it. Thank you so much for being here. Any last goodbyes you want to say, Jasmine, to our viewers before we sign off?
Thanks for joining us.
Tom?
Yep, I hope everyone had fun and maybe learned something. And thank you, Jonathan, for all your work on this. Appreciate it.
It's a pleasure and a privilege and a joy. To our panelists, thank you for all you've done and continue to do in service to others. To all our friends at L&L Research, thank you for all you've done and continue to do in service to others. For everyone watching this on video in the near or distant future, thank you for all you've done and continue to do in service to others. We are sending you our love light, and we are receiving yours. Until next time, in the love and light of the one infinite creator, Adonai, Namaste. See you.